Just because it's normal doesn't mean it's natural. And just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's safe. Have you ever stopped to ask, what does it really mean to be natural? Not what's been normalized, not what's been taught, but what your body knows instinctively, intuitively, without needing explanation. In today's world, it's easy to confuse what's common with what's true. We've, we've normalized so many things that are deeply unnatural to the human spirit. Chronic stress, normal. Constant productivity, normal. Disconnection from the body, from breath, from truth, somehow also normal. But none of that is natural. And the longer we live in systems that confuse performance for presence, doing for being, adaptation for evolution, the more disconnected we become from who we actually are. This disconnection is not just mental, it's physical, emotional, spiritual. It shows up in the body as tension, anxiety, shallow breath, fatigue, mistrust, numbness. It shows up in the mind as loops, doubts, and the sense that no matter how hard you try, you're still not home. And I want to say something that may feel like a soft truth or a hard one too. Your body remembers your natural state, even if your mind forgot, even if you've adapted to a version of life that feels efficient, functional, productive, but not alive. Today, we begin to return, not to the past, but to something older than conditioning, more ancient than culture, more trustworthy than external validation. Your nature. Hi, it's Veronica, and welcome back to Align with Veronica. In today's episode, I'm reflecting on something that touches every part of our lived experience. What it means to be natural in a world that has taught us to be everything but. We'll explore the difference between what's been normalized and what's truly aligned. We'll talk about how disconnection becomes our baseline and why so much of what's familiar is actually keeping us stuck, and how returning to your natural rhythm isn't about going back in time, but about remembering what your body already knows. This reflection includes a simple guided pause to help you soften into presence, and I invite you to let it meet you where you are, not as something to fix, but as something to feel. Because being natural doesn't mean you're always calm or still. It means you're real. It means your breath moves, your emotions flow, your nervous system speaks, and you learn to listen. So pause with me for a moment and ask, what have you been calling normal that your body knows isn't true? And what would it feel like right now to stop performing, to stop clenching, and to simply come back to yourself? Let's take a breath into that and begin. I want to share something that came to me recently, a simple image. Maybe you've heard versions of this before, but this one felt personal. Imagine a young tree planted in a container. From the moment it grows, it has to twist and bend to fit the shape of what holds it. The roots wrap in circles. The trunk curves not because that's how trees are meant to grow, but because the container demands it. Over time, the tree becomes used to this shape. It stops questioning it. It even finds ways to thrive within it. That becomes its normal. But let me be clear. I'm not saying that container was good or bad. Maybe someone placed the tree there with the best intentions. Maybe it was all they knew. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because the shape the tree took wasn't its natural shape. It was adaptive, survival based. Now, the difference between that tree and us, that tree can't move itself, but we can. We can ask, what kind of container was I planted in? Was it one of safety, presence, truth, and love? Or one of pressure, distortion, and performance? We can choose to replant ourselves, to soften the roots that learn to twist, to stand a little taller, even if it's unfamiliar. And that choice, that is not regression, that is healing. And here's where it gets layered. Sometimes we hear these reflections and say, but that's not realistic. This isn't the way the world works. We're evolved. But I wonder, have we really evolved? Or have we just learned to cope with disconnection just a little bit better? Because real evolution doesn't mean becoming more efficient at suppressing emotion. It doesn't mean accepting numbness as the price of success. True evolution isn't away from our humanity, it's deeper into it. More presence, more integrity, more embodiment. And so much of what we call progress in modern culture is built on a foundation of distortion. Systems that reward burnout, structures that disconnect us from the earth, from each other, from ourselves. A pace of life that forgets that presence is a birthright, not a luxury. Adapting to a broken system isn't the same as living in alignment. So, yes, society has shifted to a broken, but the question is, have you shifted with it, or have you shifted away from yourself? Let's take a moment now to come back into your nature. If you can, place both your feet on the ground. Let your hands rest somewhere on your body, maybe on your belly, your heart, your lap. And breathe. No fixing, no effort. Just let your breath arrive. Feel the rhythm of your inhale and feel the exhale release. Notice the ground beneath you. Notice the quiet intelligence of your body. You don't need to do anything to be here. You're already here. This is a reminder. This is your nature. Not the stress, not the fear, not the proving. This stillness, breath, presence. Let yourself remember. There is a place inside you, beneath the habits, beneath the patterns, where you're not performing or proving. You're just present, not perfect, not finished, but real. And when you settle into that space, when you remember it's here, you return to something ancient. This is the nature the ancient teachings point to, not as a concept, but as a lived reality, not a fantasy of bliss, not something you escape from life, but the quiet truth beneath the noise, a resting in your true self, not because life stopped, but because you did, just long enough to remember. And I want to pause here because I think it's really important that I say this. When I speak about stillness, about returning to your natural state, I'm not talking about sitting in some constant Zen bubble, untouched by life. Life moves. Life is meant to move through you. Emotions rise, energy shifts. That's not unnatural. That's being human. What I'm pointing to is that we've been conditioned to either hold on to every experience or run from it, to cling to excitement, to suppress grief, to stay on all the time, or to numb ourselves into silence. And what gets lost in that tug of war is the middle, the moment of grounding, that sacred pause, the one that says, wait, let me come back to my body before I attach a story. Let me breathe before I decide what this feeling means. Stillness is not about an action. Stillness is where clarity begins. It's the moment your nervous system says, I'm safe enough to feel. And without that safety, there can be no healing, only surviving. And I'm saying this because I've lived it. I had to learn through my tension in my jaw, through holding my breath, through overriding my body, that what I thought was normal was actually pain. I didn't know how much I had been compensating until I started listening. And honestly, it was painful. Painful to see how false so much of my life had been. Not because I was fake, but because I didn't know who I was without the distortion. You were not born to perform. You were not born to produce. You were born to be. And I know that returning to your natural state might feel unfamiliar at first, maybe even unsafe, especially if the systems around you never reflected it back. But what's unfamiliar is not always wrong. Sometimes it's just the part of you haven't met in a while. That part remembers. So here's your invitation to question what you've normalized, to notice where you've adapted, and to reclaim the truth of what it means to be natural, to be human, to be you. And if it feels hard to return, if the noise is loud and the world pulls you away from your breath, know that you're not meant to do it all at once. This path of returning to your nature, it asks for trust. It asks for energy, for courage. It asks you to remember what your body knows, but what your mind may have forgotten. It's not a sprint, it's a practice, a relationship, a returning over and over with presence, with patience, with love. Thank you for being here with me, for listening, for pausing, for remembering. This reflection wasn't about changing yourself. It was an invitation to notice what's already here, to question what you've called normal, and to fill into what your body knows it's true. You don't have to force your way into alignment. You don't have to become someone new. You simply return to your breath, to your ground, to the rhythm that was never lost, only covered. And if something stirred in you today, if a part of you softened or questioned or began to feel, honor that. Not with pressure, not with a plan, but with presence. Because healing isn't a project, it's a remembering. And you, in your natural state, are already enough. If this episode spoke something inside you, I invite you to carry it gently. And if you feel called, share it with someone else who may be questioning what you've been taught to normalize. You don't return by force. You return by remembering. You rest, not because the world is quiet, but because you've stopped fighting your place in it. That's where your nature lives. And it's always here, waiting. Until next time, stay with your breath. Stay close to your body. And remember, you were never meant to grow inside a container that couldn't hold your truth. And you don't have to stay there anymore.